Okay, we're discussing 1984, the great novel by George Orwell today. I would say it's the book of clearest intelligence in English, in any language, novel in any language. It's so clear-sighted, so lucid, so logical, and therefore so frightening. Okay, there are a lot of misconceptions about it, misunderstandings. Orwell published the book, I think, in 1949, and people want to think, I think this is a Korean tendency, since Koreans tend to, okay, I would say Koreans tend to be more superstitious than some people, though Americans are quite superstitious too. And Koreans especially like predictions of the future. Nostradamus, things like this. Okay. So people think that this book is somehow a prediction. No, it's not a prediction. It's a what-if book. It's true, in 1949 he projects into some future, 1984, but he's thinking, what if this were to happen? Or even, is it possible that this could happen? The this is absolute power, absolute political power. Orwell had visited the Soviet Union during the 1930s, the Stalin era. At that time, he had been a socialist, and earlier. I better explain about Orwell a little bit. Good private school education, but no university. Lived abroad, in India especially. And relatively early, when was Orwell born? I don't remember, but let's say 1900, though I don't think he lived that long, but maybe. During the 1920s, he became a socialist, like many British intellectuals, like many European intellectuals, like some American intellectuals. Why? Well, the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, as we call them, and we'll deal with them sometime in The Great Gatsby. We'll talk about that important book sometime. An era of great prosperity, generally, but I have to keep backing up. World War I, 1914 to 1918, seemed to thinking people to be the death knell, K-N-E-L-L, the death bell, so to speak, of the bourgeoisie, the middle class, the capitalistic middle class in the world, especially in Europe. World War I was such a mess. It shouldn't have happened, but as always, when historians look at it, look at things, there's a certain inevitability about it. Excuse me, I better back up some more. Sorry. Okay, the 19th century, 18th Britain and England, England and France, but 19th, the rest of Europe, was a time of the chasing after colonies. It was imperialism gone wild. It was the age of European imperialism worldwide, because after all, England or Europe controlled the world in the 19th century, except for North and a little bit South America, because we Americans stood our ground. But European imperialistic aggression was so unbridled, uncontrolled during the 19th century. Now, one problem was that the French and the British had a huge head start. The British had this huge empire controlled by their navy, by their ships, and they had the strongest in the world during that time. America slowly growing to pass them in the 20th century. Britain had a huge had a huge empire. The French also had quite a large empire, but they had lost to the British some key places, for example, the United States, and other places. Germany did not become a unified country until 1871. Italy did not become a unified country until 1871. And these countries found themselves hopelessly behind in the race for colonies. And so they very aggressively started pursuing colonies. And the Germans, frustrated, opposed the British from time to time. So during this period, the European countries started to make alliances. And this alliance business is a recipe for disaster. Or, more accurately, this alliance network was a recipe for a world war. Why? Countries A and B say, I will help you if you help me. If anyone attacks me, you help me. If anyone attacks you, I help you. C and D, seeing this, say, I don't like this. C and D, let's be friends. If anyone attacks you, I help you. If anyone attacks me, you help me. And so the network just grew and grew and grew. And logically, if anyone attacked anyone, everyone was involved. And it didn't take much, really. In 1914, in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, now Bosnia, then then Bosnia too, Yugoslavia basically, an Austrian archduke, very high-ranking aristocrat, was assassinated by a radical student in his carriage, and the result was that Austria declared war on Bosnia. Well, the network spread, and immediately everyone was involved. A world war, almost a world war. It's kind of a misnomer, false name. But many countries were involved, and there were battles even in the Falkland Islands off of Argentina, and battles in African countries, small ones though. Of course, World War I was nothing compared with World War II, but it was still quite a large, widespread war. Okay, now, it was a war of trench warfare and gas, poison gas. 10 to 11 million people died, largely soldiers. It was a soldier war, not too much civilian bombing. That was the style of World War II, civilian bombing. So this meant the decimation, radical reduction of young men in Europe, and the British suffered especially too. Okay, the outcome, just as a footnote, we'll talk about this some other time, but the outcome, of course, the U.S. tried to stay out of the war, but finally got involved, of course, on the side of the British. Everyone knew this would happen, but we did try to stay out of the thing, because it seemed to be a European mess. But we finally entered in 1917, and it was over in 1918. The Treaty of Versailles was a very unfair thing. In the Treaty of Versailles, the French made huge demands of the Germans, unfair ones basically, doesn't matter what, thus preparing the way for Hitler's rise to power in Germany. Okay, now through all this, where was Orwell? Orwell was, like any thinking person, was disgusted by World War I. It seemed to be imperialistic, middle-class, capitalistic men and their corruption which had created that mess. And surely something more just, something juster than democracy which was basically middle class power, bourgeois imperialism, really, surely a juster form of government was possible than democracy, because democracy was simply capitalism in disguise and imperialism. And so these people were very attracted to Marx, Lenin, and socialism. Why? Because they were bad guys? No, because they were good guys, actually. I think they were idealistic. They believed that if a true socialism could be established, then the huge differences between the very rich and the very poor would be evened out a little bit, or a lot. And this is a noble aim. Who could deny that? A bit too idealistic as things have turned out. Okay. In Russia, especially, well, then in 1929 we had the stock market crash and the depression, the Great Depression during the 30s, which hurt many people, especially the poor, the lower laboring classes. More reason to become a socialist with Orwell. Orwell rose in the Socialist Party, and he was even invited to visit the Soviet Union under Stalin. But he saw what was going on through the play, through the staging, and he saw that it was a brutal, brutal system. And so all of this was the background to his writing of 1984. In 1984, what has happened? Okay, a world war happened, and then apparently maybe even an atomic war, a nuclear war, had taken place. Destruction, huge. Death, huge. But out of that situation had arisen a government in England. Okay, what's the situation? There are three empires, not empires really, territories in the world. Oceania, comprising England and the USA, though the whole novel takes place in England. Eurasia, Europe, Russia, and East Asia, Southern Asia, and Africa. Now, we never really know that this is true. More information. Oceania, England is no longer England, but is part of a territory called Airstrip 1. London is still the capital of Airstrip 1, though. Okay, who's in power in Oceania? Big Brother. Big Brother, his picture is everywhere, just like Stalin's was, just like Kim Jong-il's, I'm sure, was, and Kim Il-sung's was. Really, the parallels between North Korea and the situation in 1984 are striking. The parallels are very, very close in general. What does this mean? One man has absolute power. His party supports him and enforces the rules and all that. And no one dares to oppose him at all. Anyone who does, or anyone who does anything, maybe, winds up in one of those camps in North Korea, where at least 200,000 people are, and where the most horrible things happen. Okay, that's the parallel. The same thing is true in London, in England. Big Brother, Stalin, and his party, the party represent 15% of the population. The rest of the population are all proles. Prole means proletariat, Russian term for the working class. The 15% is divided between the inner party and the outer party. The inner party, 5%, even less maybe. The outer party, many. Okay. They control everything. Their control is absolute. And what the novel shows is that such a situation is possible. North Korea. Such a situation is possible. And yes, it is possible to keep power. Because the party has studied the past. They're very intelligent. They've analyzed Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, which had fallen, excuse me, and other regimes, regimes, and they have discovered the mistakes that those people made. And they, the party, are determined not to make the same mistakes, but rather to learn from those mistakes. Okay, enough background for a moment. The main character is Winston Smith. He's 39 years old. He's an outer party worker. He works in one of the 4 ministries. He works in the Ministry of Truth. But the Ministry of Truth produces only lies. Just like the Ministry of Love produces only hate. Just like the Ministry of Plenty produces basically poverty. And the 4th one I don't remember. Justice, probably. Absolutely, justice. Okay, Winston lives in a small apartment, in a big apartment, government apartment building. Nothing works very well, but in the opening scene, Winston wakes up to the television. Get up, time to get up, rise up and work for Big Brother, hooray, Big Brother, blah, blah, blah. Smith, you there in room 1003. The telescreen not only transmits pictures, but can see us. And telescreens are everywhere, everywhere. Now that, of course, is a big difference between this and North Korea. So if the North Koreans had the money and the technology that these people had, and it's not much, there would be telescreens everywhere, and resistance would be even more impossible. And that's the situation. Okay, get up there, Smith, you there in room 1003. Get up and do your exercises. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And they're watching him, and he has to get up. He's in pain, he has some sore, blah, blah, blah. But he gets up. He's a smoker and a drinker, of course, everyone is. But he gets up. Ha, 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 ha. Then, maybe later that day, after he goes to work at his office, Mini-Truth, Ministry of Truth, he returns to his room, and his room is configured in such a way that the telescreen cannot see one area. There's a little corner, and in that area he has his desk. Now, he goes to that area quietly and pulls out from a secret place in his desk a pretty book, not perhaps unlike this, but velvet probably, nice color, opens it and starts to write. He has bought an illegal item, a diary, and he is doing something very illegal, keeping a diary. If he gets caught, he's dead. Now, let's establish from the start. When he bought that diary, he bought it at a little shop, let's call it kind of an antique shop. But antique is too much, nothing expensive, little things from the past. The party has tried to destroy everything from the past, all reminders of the past. When Winston entered that shop, he was dead. And he knew it. Does he really think the party doesn't know that that shop exists? Does he really think that the party doesn't know that he entered that shop? Does he really think that the party doesn't know that he bought that item, that illegal diary? Now, more important, does he really think that the party who designed the apartment, who designed the building, they designed everything, doesn't know about that little corner, that hidden corner? Of course it does. It put that corner there. Does he really think that he can write things in this diary and not be discovered? He's been watched through the whole thing already. So from the beginning of the novel, 2 things, to simplify a lot. From the point of view of Winston, the novel is about a suicide, because it's an act of suicide. He's committing suicide. From the point of view of the party, this novel is an experiment. This party watches him all the time. The party knows everything he does. There is no way that the party doesn't know. So why are they letting him do this? It's an experiment. At a certain point, they will strike, they will capture him, and then the experiment will continue, because the rest of the experiment will be his torture and rehabilitation, his treatment for insanity, making him sane again, making him love Big Brother and the party, because that's the only sane belief, only sane way to live. Anything else is suicide. If suicide can be called sane, then okay, an act of suicide, sane, he's dead. But I think an act of suicide like this is really insane. The party certainly thinks so, and even Winston thinks so. He's dead. Suicide, from his point of view, experiment from the party's point of view. Okay. And if, as soon as you see the novel from that point of view, you realize exactly what it is. The rest is a lucid analysis of how the party stays in power. We know already, though, what the party's beliefs or ideology is, and we discover much more about Winston and really about people. Very interesting, very absorbing reading, and so intelligent on every page, so intelligent. Okay, so Winston goes to work where he falsifies documents from the past, because the party realizes that to control the past is to control the present. To control the present is to control the future. It's all this Marxist, very clear Marxist Soviet thinking taken to a new height. And so Winston does his part. He changes articles in the past in the newspapers which reported things different from how the party had predicted. So it makes the party's predictions, he makes the party's predictions come true for the past. And he kind of likes his work. Some of his colleagues, his more intelligent colleagues perhaps, are involved in making a new dictionary called Newspeak. The party is controlling language and reducing language more and more to a cheapened, let's call it American slang. That is a vulgarization, vulgar, V-U-L-G-A-R, a vulgarization and a diminish of words. Why? Because if we can't say things, if we can't formulate by words feelings or ideas, then our power becomes much less, and the party's power becomes much greater. Controlling language. Very clever, and they've already done this. And so we have all these, what we would call acronyms. From a conservative point of view, acronyms are terrible. Acronyms are a confession of poverty of language. Even USA, okay, no one is that conservative, it's kind of absurd. But especially in America, the number of acronyms that we have is huge. And in any socialistic country, where the government is so vast and so pervasive, the number of acronyms increases even more than in the US. So, Newspeak. We watch him through a day. The food at the cafeteria, terrible. The vodka, terrible. The cigarettes, terrible. All made by the party, of course. And all the time, we get on the telescreens, some telescreens just huge, like buildings, bulletin, bulletin. We are at war, of course, with East Asia, and we get these bulletins about these great victories that our armies are winning over East Asia. 100,000 prisoners. We even see mass murders of prisoners, Asians. This hatred of Asians, why? Because they're the enemy. Okay. And the people laugh at the murders, laugh at the executions, laugh at terrible things. So we see a coarsening, C-O-A-R-S-E-N-I-N, coarsening of human sensibility, of human moral feelings and sensibility, all worked by the party, and all helping the party to stay in power. Other things we see. In marriage, the party doesn't really like marriage, because in marriage, or in love affairs, two people are coming together, exchanging feelings and ideas which the party cannot control. So the party only countenances, tolerates, permits marriage for reproduction. And the party is very negative about sex. And so all women and girls join the chastity league, the anti-sexuality league, and they have rallies and demonstrations and enthusiastic hikings and athletic events for girls to promote chastity and to discourage sexual contact between two people. And even in marriage this works, because the telescreens, after all, are everywhere. And the little children, when they're 6, 7, or 8, are encouraged to spy on the parents. And a good child will be a good party member, of course, and will be very enthusiastic about the party, and will certainly betray his or her parents, and this happens twice in the novel. So what can happen? Nothing can happen. The second two most important characters are introduced in part 1, and the whole novel unfolds in a relatively predictable way. The first time reader can't see all this. The second time reader can't see it either. Can see more though, of course. By the third or fourth time, one sees the inevitability of everything in the novel. The only question in the novel really is, when will the party capture Winston and torture him? That's the only question. One might say, and why do they wait as long as they do? The reason why is easily answered. Experiment. They are watching him, gaining information about him. They want to know him to his core, and they will. They will know him to his core. They will know him better than any mother could know a child, a lover, certainly better than he himself knows himself. All this they're doing. They have picked him out. Later we will learn why. I'll tell you now. Winston is still legally married. Excuse me. His wife was Catherine. They have been separated for 11 years. He has no idea where Catherine is. Catherine was an enthusiastic member of the Chastity Club. Catherine hated any contact between the two, did it only for the party, submitted only for the party, and Winston hated it, and hated her. Hated her, I think, because she so stupidly accepted everything the party said. So we see that Winston has this edge of hostility for the party. In fact, his opening words in his journal, his diary, I hate Big Brother, down with Big Brother, down with Big Brother. By the way, that journal, the diary, he puts some powder on the diary after he closes it, so that he can tell whether anyone has found the diary and has looked at it. And when he returns to the diary, he finds the powder there, and he thinks, well, no one touched it. Well, this of course is silly. The party doesn't see the powder, maybe. The party hasn't hasn't lived this drama many times before. Of course, the party knows all these tricks. So the party, we assume, goes into the apartment, removes the powder, reads the diary, closes the diary, puts the powder back where Winston put it, and puts the diary back where Winston had it. Of course, of course. There's no doubt about this. As soon as you begin by the position of the room, as soon as you begin from the antique Guldongpum kind of little store, knick-knack store, bric-a-brac is what we call it, which the party controls too, all this is absolutely inevitable. Back to our story. Winston hates the party, established that. And anyone who appears to love the party, he hates also. Or he feels contempt for as a stupid, mindless person. Okay. Toward the end of part one, Winston has been noticing every day in his office building, at 10 o'clock in the morning maybe, they have a 2-minute hate. That's when the party members go to like a movie theater, small though, and the party shows pictures of these enemies of the party, enemies of Big Brother, and the party members scream, hate, 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 call him terrible names. And Winston noticed, and Winston does this too, though Winston, of course, does not hate this man. And he notices a pretty girl. Her name is Julia, we learn. And she is especially violent in her hatred of these enemies of the party. And in one rally, she even throws a dictionary at the screen. Well, Winston really hates her. How can she be so stupid? How can she be so enthusiastic for this monstrous party and this monster Big Brother? By the way, does Big Brother exist? I think probably not. And let's establish something else. Oceania, Eurasia, East Asia. At a certain time in part 2 of the novel, because the novel is divided into 3 parts, by the way. This facilitates analysis, makes easier analysis. At a certain point in part 2, there's a massive rally in Trafalgar Square in London, not called Trafalgar Square anymore, of course. Victory Square, maybe. To cheer the soldiers on. Now, we don't even know that there are any soldiers, frankly. But a great victory, hooray, hooray, hooray. And in the middle of the rally, maybe 200, 300,000 people in the square. Huge. The speaker announces, bulletin, bulletin. We are now no longer at war with East Asia. We are now at war with Eurasia. Hooray, hooray. Hate Eurasia, hate Eurasia. Instant shift of allegiance. Everyone knows they better make that shift, or the party's watching, the telescreens are watching, and people make that shift. It's the most obvious example of what is called doublethink. Now, doublethink is the ultimate victory of the party. Doublethink means that one can believe something and its opposite fully believe at the same time. And the person who can't do doublethink is the person whom the party is looking for, and they will find and eliminate that person. Now, of course, everyone will pretend. Some really believe in doublethink, because in practical terms, doublethink means the truth is whatever the party says it is. And later, Winston will believe that 2 + 2 = 5, and he'll believe it. He will suffer greatly until he believes it. Doublethink then is, if you like, truth. Truth is what the party says it is. To oppose truth is to die. To die may be a horrible death. Okay, back to our action. The girl who threw the dictionary, pretty girl, wears the chastity belt, anti-sex chastity. One day, Winston is walking through a long underground corridor hall, and he sees the pretty girl coming toward him. He hates her. He wants to strangle her. He wants to kill her. He hates her so badly. Why? Because she is so stupidly supporting the party. She kind of falls down, and he politely reaches out to help her up, reaches his hand, and they make hand contact. And she leaves a piece of paper in his hand. He cleverly conceals this and walks on. She walks on. He gets back to his little office, which is about as big as a toilet stall in a public toilet. Reads the paper, and it says, "I love you." Wow! What's this? Meet me, blah, blah, blah. The end. And destroy this paper. Of course he destroys it. He eats it, maybe. I can't burn it. Destroys it. They meet somewhere, I don't remember where. Oh yeah, well I guess they meet out in the woods. They have to take a train somewhere, separately of course. Party is watching. They meet, they talk, they become lovers. She hates the party. She does anything she can to hurt the party. Her weapon, her name is Julia. Her weapon is, sorry for you young people here, her weapon is sex. She uses her body. She loves to seduce, have love affairs with high party officials, and she has had many. Well, this means that all of these party officials are running around, playing, doing things that the party doesn't like. Of course they are. Of course they are. And Julia just loves to show her contempt and hatred for the party by having love affairs with these officials, and the higher the better. Okay, Winston loves her for this. Winston loves her hatred of the party. Winston loves her use of her body in that way. He loves her for it. He respects her for it. And I think that's pretty great by Winston. And he loves her. And she certainly loves him. Even though they did not plan to fall in love at all. They start meeting more and more often in crazy places. After all, can they go to a hotel? Can they go to a yogwan? I don't think so. Can they meet in their offices? I don't think so. By the way, she's a low official. She's a low party member. She loves to make things and fix things with her hands. But she's great. She's great. Okay, the love affair goes on, and they meet O'Brien. O'Brien is a high party official. Very intelligent, very impressive. And he meets Winston, and he says, "I've been watching you. I like your spirit. I think you are intelligent. Come and visit me in my office. You and Julia too." He has noticed. They're afraid, but they go. They enter the office. Beautiful. Everything's beautiful. Nothing's beautiful in Oceania, but that office is beautiful. He serves them great wine. Wine is not available. By the way, a couple of ways that the party stays in power. One way is they are at war all the time. Why? Because under wartime conditions, governments have special powers. Any government, American, Korean, any government has special powers when the country is at war. Stay at war. Second, always shortages. There are always shortages, too little. Shortages of even food, but especially things like razor blades, deodorant, cigarettes, shampoo. Wine is impossible to get. Chocolate, impossible to get, except on the black market in the street. By the way, this is very similar to North Korea, I think. Same. Are these things available in the black market in North Korea? Yes, we hear they are. And the black market is an interesting phenomenon. The North Korean government tolerates the black market. I feel sure they do. Why? Because it means there's less discontent, anger at the party, because people can get things they need and want. Could the North Korean government eliminate the black market? I think so. I think they could. Did Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il read 1984? I'm sure of it. I'm sure of it. It's their textbook. Of course, Orwell had read other textbooks, but at least in a novel, it's more interesting. Black market, interesting. Okay, so we're in O'Brien's office, and he turns off the telescreen. You can't turn off telescreens. It's impossible. O'Brien can. Julia and Winston are so impressed. And then O'Brien announces to them that he is a member of the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is the opposition to Big Brother and the party. No one knows for sure that the Brotherhood exists, but O'Brien says, yes, it exists, and I'm a member, and I want you to be members too. Okay, I love it. I love you. Well, this is so stupid. The Brotherhood, of course, could not possibly exist. O'Brien, of course, is a high party member, and he's simply luring these two fools on in their act of suicide. Everything is painfully obvious, but Winston, after all, started committing suicide at the beginning of this novel, and has now decided to continue. Okay, so O'Brien says, are you willing to set off bombs in public places and kill innocent people? Yes. Are you even willing to throw acid in some little child's face for the party, for the Brotherhood? Yes. Are you willing to separate, to leave each other? No, says Julia. Winston hesitates, and then he says, no. Very interesting. Now let's examine this. First of all, Julia and Winston have said that they would do things, horrible things, just like the party does, the same kind of thing. Then where is their moral superiority? How are they superior morally? They're not. So any claim of moral superiority by Winston and Julia is lost right there. Okay. So O'Brien says, I'm going to give you a book written by our Brotherhood leader. Read it. Doesn't matter about the book or the author. He finds a way to give him the book. In fact, during that big political rally, 200, 300,000 people, someone comes up behind Winston and slips the book to him. Who could see? No telescreen could see that. Safe. Now, Winston and Julia have rented a room up above the Guldongpum, the antique, the knick-knack store, where they go all the time. Could the party not know about this? Of course the party knows. Of course the party knows. But they go there all the time, and they have their love affair there. And there, Winston reads the book. And we read the book too. It's about 40 pages of the novel. Some people don't like it, but that's foolish. To read that little book within the book is to understand the party even better. What the party is doing, why the party does what it does. Because this book analyzes the party. Winston is hungry for this information and loves it. Julia falls asleep. In fact, Winston calls Julia a rebel from the waist down. In other words, not up here, only waist down. Interesting. But she loves that, and it's true. Okay, end of part 2. They are in bed. He's reading, she's sleeping. They're both naked in their little apartment. They get up and look out the window. And they admire a kind of old woman who's hanging laundry out there across the way. She's a prole, lower class. Now, Winston admires her. She's hardworking. She's singing. She's singing old songs that Winston remembers and loves. And Winston has tried to recall some of these old songs because they represent the past. And the past was certainly better than the present. Even though the past was bad, the present is horrible. And Winston says at a certain point, we are the ones dead. That prole there is alive. Julia says, yes, we are the ones dead. And then suddenly a voice says, you are the ones dead. They turn around, a picture, like a painting, cheap, on the wall. The painting falls down, and there it is, behind the painting, a telescreen. My God, they've been watched the whole time. They've been listened to the whole time. And how foolish they were not to check. And suddenly they hear, stay where you are, don't move, loudspeaker. The building is surrounded, surrender. Steps of boots, heavy boots coming up the stairs, break the door down. In walk these black, like Nazi, SS, Gestapo troops, scary guys. And in walks Mr. Charrington. Mr. Charrington was the nice old man who ran this shop. And they used to talk, Winston and Mr. Charrington. Winston loved Mr. Charrington. Old man, they talked about the past. They talked about the songs from the past, nursery rhymes. They talked about things from the past. His whole shop is things from the past. Mr. Charrington walks in. He's not old. He's 35 years old. And he's tough. And of course, he's an inner party member. And so, none of this, all of this has been a game by the party, an experiment. They've watched Winston everywhere, all the time. They've listened to his conversations with Julia. They've watched them make love. Everything. They know. They arrest him, hit Julia in the stomach very cleverly, so that she rolls around on the floor. Why do they do that? So she doesn't scream. Can't scream. And Winston must watch, standing there nude. I think they arrest them at this time because they're nude, and therefore they're embarrassed, ashamed. They certainly can't fight or something. They look and feel too ridiculous. The game is over. End of part 2. Part 3 consists of the torture of Winston by O'Brien in Mini Truth, the Ministry of Truth, or is it Justice? Oh, Justice, Mini Justice. Mini Just, I guess. They strap him to a table. They apply electrical pressure. He questions him. When Winston gives stupid answers, all the way up to 3,000. And a time or two, O'Brien is so annoyed with Winston, 2,000, 2,500. And everything O'Brien says is true. And Winston knows that everything O'Brien says is true. And gradually, Winston is tortured, is questioned, tortured, questioned, very badly hurt sometimes, but allowed to recover his health. And from the beginning of part 3, when he's taken into this terrible building, with other prisoners, other people are there too, including his neighbor, the husband who was turned in by his little daughter. From the beginning of part 2, people have mentioned room 101. Room 101. And when people mention it, people are horrified, terrified. And one poor man screams he would do anything to avoid room 101. Okay. Winston's heard about it, but after many torturings and many shocks and all that, O'Brien says, by the way, Winston loves O'Brien. Winston respects O'Brien like a god. And O'Brien is kind of like a god. He's so impressive. And he has answers for everything Winston says, of course. And at one point, O'Brien permits Winston to ask some questions. He asks, does Big Brother really exist? What have you done with Julia? And there are 6 questions really, but the most important are these. And what is in room 101? O'Brien's answer, you know already what's in room 101. And really he does know, just like he's known everything that would happen from the beginning of the novel. In this novel, a suicide novel. Because in room 101, one faces one's ultimate fear. And the party has analyzed this, of course, and the party, of course, knows what Winston's ultimate fear is, and Julia's, and in a way that's why they arrest him then, but they knew this maybe weeks or a month before. Okay. One's ultimate fear. Some people's ultimate fear is drowning, maybe. Some people's ultimate fear is suffocation, falling from some terrible height, being buried alive. I think that's mine. Other things. Winston's ultimate fear, in part 2, they were in their apartment there, and suddenly a rat ran across the floor. Julia was amused. Winston was horrified, because the rat had reminded him of some incident in his childhood, some terrible incident in his childhood. So they discovered his. So, at a certain point, room 101, Winston's taken in there. Of course, they use drugs to make people pass out and sleep so that they are easily controlled. And when Winston wakes up, his head, his whole body is strapped to a chair. He can't move. And he can't move his head either. And a cage is put around his head. And there is a screen, like a wire screen, between him and 2 huge, starving, violent rats. And there he is, face to face with these terrible, scary creatures that would terrify anyone, but Winston especially. And O'Brien starts asking him questions. And of course, Winston will say or do anything. And then, just when it looks like O'Brien will remove the screen, these rats will eat his face off. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible thing. The Chinese invented this thing, by the way, apparently. Chinese were very good at this kind of thing, apparently. Winston screams, no, don't do that. Do it to Julia. Do it to Julia. Wow. The end. The cage is taken away. Winston is set free. We learn. Why? Why that? That's exactly what the party wanted. That destroyed any love that would be possible between him and Julia. Meanwhile, Julia is undergoing similar torture. Finally, at the end of the novel, Winston has some easy job. He can spend most of every day in a bar watching the telescreen. His mind is kind of... he now loves the party. He loves Big Brother. He is sane. He runs into Julia. Julia has a large scar across her forehead, which she covers with her hair, but can't cover. And she's changed too. And they talk. Winston tries to put his arm around her, but it's hopeless. She's changed. He's changed. Even physically, she has changed. She's thicker, kind of. And I think probably her ultimate fear was the loss of her beauty. And that's what that scar did. And that changed her. And probably she said, do it to Winston. Do it to Winston. So they have a few words, but nothing. And the novel ends with the words, he loved Big Brother. He's sitting there drinking his gin in that cafe. He loved Big Brother. It's hinted that someday, at some time, some party guy will come up behind him and put a bullet in his head. Boom. And that will be the end. Until that time, he loves Big Brother, and when that happens, it's okay. The end. Questions. From Winston's point of view, what is the novel about and why? From the party's point of view, what is the novel about and why? Those are the two main questions. Why is love impossible? Number 3. Why is love impossible in that world? These are very big questions. A much smaller question, discuss Julia. Winston too big. That's enough, I think.